Alrighty, Anya, I think we have round 2 ready to go. Ready when you are.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig. Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of this Barriers Fund Program training webinar series. In part 1, we reviewed in detail all of the program documents required to be included in each client file in HMIS. For part 2 of this training series, we're going to be discussing grant reporting requirements and submission procedures for the request for reimbursement report for the Barriers Fund program. This training is applicable to agency staff who work to prepare the monthly reimbursement report on behalf of the subrecipient agency and submit that report for reimbursement to Texas Homeless Network on a monthly basis. In some cases, that agency staff is the same as those who provide the direct client assistance. At other agencies, it's different staff who work to prepare and submit the report on behalf of the agency. That's why we decided to split this training series up into 2 separate webinars. Now, in looking at our agenda, you can see on that second item there, section A, one of the most common questions that I get about the submission of the monthly reimbursement report is where documents for direct client assistance, program costs, and admin costs are uploaded to. Oh, I just see Lucas chatted. They cannot hear anything, so I don't know if that's an isolated incident or across the board. Looks like Craig is able to hear. Is anybody else having audio issues? John can hear as well, so it may just be isolated to Lucas. All right, looks like Craig will provide that support needed. So I will keep going. So again, one of the most common questions that I receive is about how and where to upload support documentation that backs up costs incurred for direct client assistance, program costs, and administrative costs. Now, before I go into this, I just want to remind everyone that as part of the Barriers Fund program, each of our subrecipient agencies could have up to 3 budget line items for the Barriers Fund. These budget line items were included in the initial Barriers Fund program application and is something that we included as part of the service contract. And of course, you can see that as part of your agency's RFR or reimbursement report. Some agencies, you'll notice, only have funding for direct client assistance and do not have any funds for program or admin costs. Other agencies have funding for all 3 budget line items. It really just depends on what was written into that initial application and how your agency's total award is broken down. So if you are one of the agencies who has direct client assistance and either program or admin costs or both, there are a couple of different ways in which you will submit the support documentation for the costs incurred on a monthly basis. As we just reviewed in part 1 of this training series, all support documentation to back up direct client assistance should be included in the appropriate or corresponding client file in HMIS. That means, for example, if a client received rental assistance, a copy of the check submitted to that landlord or any kind of proof of payment to support that expenditure would be a part of the PDF packet included in that client file. Therefore, no support documentation that backs up the direct client assistance is uploaded via our Google Forms submission portal, which we will review today. So anything direct client assistance related goes into HMIS. On the other hand, if your agency has funds allocated towards program and/or admin costs, then you would upload support documentation to back up costs incurred under those line items to our Google Forms submission portal for the Barriers Fund program. That is how those documents are obtained from each agency, and where I go to access those documents and how I review them and save them for our records. Now, with that said, I want to take a look at an example request for reimbursement report that I created for the purpose of this training series. So I want to share my screen here so that you all can see this example request for reimbursement report. And I'm going to blow it up a little bit so you can see all of the fields here. So this is an example request for reimbursement report. And as Craig mentioned, this document is also item number 2 in the materials box below the chat. So you can follow along with us there if you'd like to download this example. Each of our CSBG Care subrecipient agencies received a copy of this reimbursement report for their agency. So this is an example, but your agency has a RFR reimbursement report based on your agency's total award and how it is broken down. One of the things important to note here is all of the fields highlighted in yellow. These are the fields required to be completed by each subrecipient agency on a monthly basis. So you can see here for this example, our example agency receives $41,500 in direct client assistance. They receive $7,000 in program costs and $1,500 in admin. On a monthly basis, the agency would write in the amount incurred for each budget line item. Then, once the Excel document calculates the total award requested for that month, the agency staff preparing this document would then write it in part 2 of this amount requested field. So you can see here in July, this example agency requested $11,619.14 in direct client assistance only. That is why this part 2 matches the most recent payment request received. Down at the bottom of this form is the staff member's name who prepares the report and their signature, as well as the staff member who authorizes the report and a signature from them as well. So the first tab in the request for reimbursement report is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory in terms of what is required to be included here. One of the things that gets a little bit more complicated is the client list, which is the second tab in the request for reimbursement report. You can see here on this client list, we require each agency to document, track, and report back to the HMIS client ID for the clients who received assistance for that month, the service date, service description, and the total costs incurred or spent for that client. Now this client list tab, you can see, is broken down into the various grant contract months. So in this case, for our example agency, April through July. The client list, of course, the total based on that month, should always match the amount listed on the direct client assistance line item on the first tab of the RFR. For example, you can see that in July, based on what is documented here in this client list table, this amount in red matches the amount requested in the July column for direct client assistance. One of the main things that I wanted to share as a reminder with you all is how to track clients who receive assistance for that particular month. I've seen some agencies who, in creating or completing this client list table, include the services in different line items. For example, one client, let's just take this one as an example, 133128, is listed in maybe 4 or 5 different line items based on the assistance provided. As you can see here, this client received rental assistance, 3 months worth actually of rental assistance. So instead of writing this client into 3 different line items at $650 for that rental assistance, it's easier for us to review if you put the client in one line item. For example, if you have one client who has multiple service dates, so that means they came back several times during that month, you can track the first point of contact or the first date the client received assistance, and then always include a comment here of the other dates that month that the client may have received assistance. Same with this column D, the service description. Let's say the client received rental assistance and utility assistance. So you can see here, as an example, this client, instead of having them on 2 different line items, we have utility assistance as the service description, but in the comment, you can also see that this client received not only utility assistance, but food assistance for this total amount. This just really helps simplify the client list tab. And instead of having more line items, it just reduces it to 1 line item per client. If you have any questions about this or working with unique situations as you work to prepare the reimbursement report, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. And I can certainly provide technical assistance as needed. But this is just a reminder, each client should have their own line item and only one on this client list table. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to share with you now the monthly Google Forms submission portal where we collect not only the reimbursement report from each agency, but also the support documentation as applicable for program and admin costs. So I'm going to launch this link. You should see it in your browser. This is the Barriers Fund monthly performance report submission form portal. If you don't see this pop up on your screen, there is a web links box here in Adobe Connect where you can just click on this Barriers Fund program submission portal and it should open it up for you. You can see here that, let me actually start sharing my screen again so that you can see what I'm doing. All right. So listed on today's agenda, I included the password for the Barriers Fund program monthly expenditure report submission portal, as that is a question that I get very often. This is a password, this document or this portal is password protected, but the password doesn't change. And it's the same for all of our CSBG subrecipients. Craig just dropped it there in the chat if you would like to have access to it. So that is the password you would enter to access the Google Forms submission portal. Once you enter the password and hit next, you will be directed to this next screen and just complete the information that is requested. So you can see it asks the first question, the name of the person or staff member completing this form. So you would type in your name, the agency as it appears on the Barriers Fund program contract, which month's expenditures you are reporting on. So you can see we have the months listed there. So I'm going to select August as an example. Now, here's where you would upload a copy of the monthly expenditure report, which is that RFR that we were just looking at. What's important to note here is that that request for reimbursement report should only be uploaded in an Excel file. This file upload right here does not support any other file formats other than Excel, as that is how we review and process the monthly expenditure reports. So you can add the file. And I'm going to add ours here for an example. So I'm going to upload that to the submission portal. And then here it's going to ask in this last question on this page, if the agency incur direct program or admin costs. I want to highlight this because program costs does not include direct client assistance. So I often see agencies who do not have an award or funding allocated for program costs select that they did in fact incur program costs, which is inaccurate. So direct program costs includes things like staff salary reimbursement for staff who provide direct client assistance and work one-on-one with clients who receive assistance through the Barriers Fund program. Direct program cost does not include direct client assistance. For example, rent, utility, food, transportation, medical costs. Again, that's a different process, and all of that support documentation should be uploaded to HMIS. So again, it asks, did your agency incur direct program or admin costs? You can either select no, yes, program and admin costs, yes, only admin costs, or yes, only program costs. So for the purpose of this training, I'm going to select yes, program and admin costs and hit next. Now you can see here, this is where an agency is required to upload the support documentation or backup for program and admin costs. This first file upload would be the support documentation for program costs incurred during that particular reporting period. And similarly, this second file upload is where an agency would upload any support documentation for admin costs. What we are looking for here is would be, for example, if the agency is requesting a percentage of salary or salary reimbursement for an employee who directly worked with the program and provided direct client assistance, or maybe they are involved more at the administrative level where they process or prepare the reimbursement report. We would require all support documentation that backs up those expenditures. For salary reimbursement, which is what we see most often, That would include a copy of the staff member's timesheet for that reporting period or timesheets, a copy of their paycheck stubs, and their, just to note, the timesheets should include a breakdown of how much time was allocated or how much time they spent working on the Barriers Fund program related tasks or items. That's what I'm going to be reviewing on a monthly basis. If your agency is requesting costs outside of salary reimbursement, please let me know so that way I can have a one-on-one meeting with you and your agency, and we can talk about what kind of support documentation would be required for those costs that fall under those categories. Now, the last upload you see here is a copy of the agency's cost allocation plan. For those of you who have submitted a reimbursement request form before, I do have a copy of your agency's cost allocation plan on file. For those of you who have not yet submitted a reimbursement request, I do not have a cost allocation plan on file for your agency. The cost allocation plan is required in order for Texas Homeless Network to be able to process and approve the reimbursement request received. Cost allocation plan, if you're not familiar with what that document is, I can definitely provide support in creating that document with your agency so that way you can submit it and meet this requirement. The cost allocation plan essentially is a resource that allows me to keep record or track of what percentage or how we are, or the agency is calculating salary reimbursement for staff members who receive or who are involved in program administration. So it's essentially a resource that I use on a monthly basis and I reference in order to ensure that the payment request for that month for those salary reimbursements or that staff time is calculated according to what is written and notated on the cost allocation plan. If your agency is in need of an example cost allocation plan, I can certainly share that with you. Your agency may also already use a cost allocation plan for another grant-funded program. And so you're welcome to adopt that cost allocation plan for the purpose of the Barriers Fund program. Or like I mentioned, please feel free to reach out to me and I'm more than happy to provide the support needed to ensure that your agency is able to meet this requirement. One other thing that I wanted to note here is the importance of submitting a copy of the agency's general ledger and or bank statements or some other financials that show proof of payment, not only for the direct client assistance provided, but that the staff members that for the staff who the agency is requesting salary reimbursement for, that they have been in fact paid. So some agencies like to or prefer to email me a copy of their agency's general ledger or bank statements or financials so that I can reconcile the reimbursement report to what is on those and verify that all expenditures have in fact been paid out. The Barriers Fund program, again, just operates as a reimbursement grant. That means we are not eligible or we are not able to process or approve reimbursement for costs that have not been paid out. This is where it gets kind of confusing and why it's so critical to submit a copy of your agency's general ledger or bank statements or other financials showing proof of payment. We run into pretty often, especially when it comes towards the end of the month, issues like, let's say an agency pays for in advance a client's August rental assistance. So that happens at the very end of 1 month. And then the agency submits a reimbursement request by the 5th of the following month. But because it was for August rent, that cost has not yet hit the agency's account and has not yet been paid out and won't be paid out until the following month. So I am only able to process reimbursement for costs paid out, and I have to have some kind of support documentation to provide proof of payment. So again, these are the 3 file uploads that would be required as applicable if your agency did in fact incur direct program costs, admin costs, and or your agency has not yet submitted a cost allocation plan. All of these fields, as you can see, because we selected on this other question here, yes, program and admin costs, when we move to this next page, you'll notice all 3 two of these file uploads are required for program and admin, but it would look different based on your response to that previous question. I'm not going to go to the next page here because I don't have any file uploads to include. These would be PDF files, typically is what I see. And the next section or the final section of this Google Forms submission portal is just like an agency's electronic signature and acknowledgement that everything on the report is accurate and to the best of that staff member's knowledge. I'm going to stop sharing here. That is the Google Forms submission portal, again, where program and admin cost support documentation are uploaded along with the monthly reimbursement report. One of the things, just some kind of general reminders before we open it up for Q&A for today's part 2 training series is I wanted to go over the post-award, some of the post-award subrecipient expectations. So as a general reminder, the monthly reimbursement reports for the Barriers Fund program are required to be submitted no later than the 5th of every single month. If your agency, something is going on, you may find that you cannot submit it in time for that particular month. There may be some delay in the submission of that report. Please reach out to me via email and let me know that you are working to submit that report and the anticipated date that you will submit that to THN for review. If I do not get that email from you, I am unable to, I don't have any way of verifying that your agency will in fact be submitting a report for that month. And so therefore, I'm just expecting your agency not to submit because I am thinking that no costs were incurred for that particular month. So please let me know. Similarly, if your agency did not incur costs for that month and will not be submitting a payment request, please let me know that as well via email so you can just keep me posted and so that I'm up to date. And so that when I start my review and approval process on the monthly payment request submitted, I can keep track of those that are received, those that are still pending, and those that won't be submitting for that particular month. Just as a quick reminder, we do have a pretty sharp turnaround deadline, internal deadline to approve and process all of the reimbursement reports. So that way we have enough time to prepare the master reimbursement report for TDHCA. That report to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs is due no later than the 15th of every single month. So we pretty much have 10 days, some months, not even 10 full business days to not only approve and process all of the reimbursement reports received from the agencies, but also prepare our master reimbursement for submission to TDHCA. So it's really, really important that not only these reports are submitted on time, but that the reports are submitted accurately and that meet the expectations of the monthly grant reporting requirements. Otherwise, it really delays the process of approving and processing the reports, and therefore delays our submission to the state. On section B there, you can see under wrap up and next steps, just as a reminder for the client eligibility documentation. So all of those program materials we reviewed in part 1 of this training series should be uploaded as one PDF file. All of the documents should be completed correctly and in their entirety, and they should be uploaded to the appropriate client file in HMIS. So when I review the reports, one of the things I do is, of course, review the client list tab. I search for the client ID numbers that are included in the client list. I go to the document upload section of that client file, and I pull that PDF packet, I save it for our records, and I review it so that I can make sure that it is complete and it is filled out correctly and the client meets all eligibility criteria. So it's really important that I am able to do that in a quick and efficient way in order to meet all of our reporting deadlines. Next, just as a general reminder is on HMIS data quality. So one thing we did not review in these training seminars is how to enter client data information in HMIS. Texas Homeless Network provided a training for HMIS users specifically for the Barriers Fund program. That is a recorded training and is something that we can grant you access to if needed. So if you would like to revisit that HMIS user training for the Barriers Fund program, please let me know. Or you can email the HMIS help desk so that they can assign you that training in our training program called Litmus. And you can reference that training webinar at a time that works best for you. Data quality in HMIS, of course, is extremely important, especially for federally funded program like the Barriers Fund. One thing that we haven't set any major requirements on, but is an expectation, is exiting clients from the Barriers Fund program. In just review of the clients who are in the Barriers Fund program in HMIS, I've noticed that very few clients have been exited from the program. There is no, like I said, strict kind of regulations or rules around when to exit a client from a program. But if I would encourage all of our CSBG Cares subrecipients to go in there and update client files. If you're no longer working with that client, or you know that client will no longer be a participant in the Barriers Fund program, they may have received like a one-time assistance, go ahead and exit them from the program so that way we can clear that out and it can be up to date. Some additional resources are there for you. Like I mentioned in the first training series is the Barriers Fund Program Policy and Procedure Manual, linked there for you, and of course in the materials box on this webinar. As I had mentioned previously, we have done some updates to that P&P manual, so I would encourage all of our subrecipients to use that manual as a guide, and of course reach out if you have any questions. Lastly, you can see there contact information for the HMIS help desk. You can contact the HMIS help desk at any time if you have questions about entering client information into HMIS and or need access to that Barriers Fund program training for HMIS users. And of course, there is my email address if you have additional questions that pop up. I know the Barriers Fund program is a very unique program. It operates, I would say it has a lot of flexibility with this funding source, but there's a lot of gray area here because there's really not a lot of strict requirements in terms of administering this program at the local level. As you all know by now, the Barriers Fund covers a variety of eligible costs, and Supports clients in many, many ways. So, because there's so much gray area with this program, we get a lot of unique situations and a lot of questions from our CSBG Care subrecipients. I advise and recommend that you reach out at any point if you have questions or need additional assistance in order to determine whether or not a cost or a client would be eligible for the Barriers Fund program before providing that assistance and submitting the report, so that way you can ensure that that cost will in fact be reimbursed. With all of that said, I am going to pause there and open up our live Q&A session so that you can ask any questions that you may have about the Barriers Fund program, specifically around reporting and submission procedures. I noticed that John has chatted a question in our chat. John asked, would it be safe to assume to keep active for 3 months while monitoring after last service? Yep, I would leave it up to the agency's discretion, as you know these clients best and are working with them. So right now the Barriers Fund program has been, or our contracts have been executed since March 15th. So we're now entering like midway point, I believe, through Q2. So if you want to go in there and check on your earlier clients that received assistance in March, April, I would advise you do that. Just make sure that you're going in there on a regular basis and updating client files accordingly. John also asked, will these folks also need a 1-year assessment? That's a really great question. I think it depends on the local Barriers Fund program that you're operating at your agency. This program, as you know, the service contracts end the end of May of 2022, so it operates as a 15-month grant cycle. I would say that if a client continuously receives assistance on a monthly basis or periodically through the Barriers Fund program, to always check in with them to ensure that they continue to meet all program eligibility requirements. So no strict rules or regulations around when to provide a reassessment, just on an as-needed basis as they continue to hopefully recover and stabilize after receiving the assistance from the Barriers Fund. Any more questions, comments, thoughts around Barriers Fund? Anything that I can help answer? I'm happy to do it during this live Q&A session, or at any time. I can always be reached via email or phone. You all have my contact information, so feel free to reach out at any time. Yep, Craig dropped it in the chat there, Anya@thn.org. Again, this part 2 of the training webinar series will be recorded, or is being recorded, and will be shared out at a later time via email. We know that not all of our subrecipient agency staff could join us for today's training. So we will be sharing that out for everyone. And if you would just pass that information along to those staff members that you work with that could benefit from this training, as we would love to have them complete this and really know and understand the requirements around reporting for the Barriers Fund. Also, if you have any questions, I know it's you've had some time to process maybe what we reviewed in the first training, part one of this training series. So if you have any questions about the program documents or anything related to the Barriers Fund, feel free to ask it now. We have about 5-ish more minutes on today's call for a live Q&A. Did you find these trainings webinars helpful as a reminder of what the requirements are in terms of collecting the program documents and through the submission process? John says it's a great refresher, so I'm glad to hear that. It has been a while since we've provided a training like this, so I think it is a good refresher, especially since I know a lot of our agencies have taken some time to implement the program at the local level and go ahead and get started using the funding. Lucas says it was a good introduction for me. Lucas, what agency are you with? Because I don't think we've met before. Ah, good neighbor. AmeriCorps Vista, awesome. Yes, so good to meet you, Lucas. I love my friends at Good Neighbor Settlement House and all of our subrecipient agencies. I'm so thankful to work with you all. I know that you work really, really hard to ensure that the reporting is on time and meets all of our expectations. It helps tremendously in terms of the review and processing the report on a monthly basis. So we also appreciate you partnering with THN to provide that direct client assistance and service clients who through the Barriers Fund program who need additional support. So always appreciate your dedication and commitment to this work. Yep, and as Craig mentioned, if there's no more questions, we can certainly end the call early. That's all of the updates or review that I had to share. Certainly can be available one-on-one if your agency has more questions or if things come up. I can be reached as needed. I see Nadia's typing, so we'll. Thank you, Nadia, so much. All right, well, I think we can go ahead and call it just right 1 minute early. So thank you all for sticking with us and powering through. That was a lot of information in a short period of time. So I hope it was beneficial for everyone. All right, bye. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and a good rest of your week.